The Housing Minister has been labelled a hypocrite for failing to apologise or compensate hundreds of tenants who were kicked out of their state houses because of flawed meth testing guidelines. Phil Twyford has ruled out any compensation or an apology to the victims, despite having relentlessly championed their cause whilst in opposition. Political reporter Benedict Collins has more.
When Phil Twyford became Housing Minister last year, he immediately asked the country's top scientist to review the country's meth contamination standards. Sir Peter Gluckman's report was released this week and revealed the country has been gripped by a moral panic, and meth residue posed no risk to health at all. Mr Twyford says hundreds of tenants were needlessly evicted by Housing New Zealand, and it wasted more than $100 million on unnecessary decontamination. The Justice Minister, Andrew Little, last night called for an apology.
If Housing New Zealand or any landlord has kicked out a tenant on the basis of testing that we now know to be bogus, or a standard we now know to be bogus, and has totally uprooted an innocent person's life, then actually I think they, at the very least, they are owed an apology.
Mr Twyford wouldn't be interviewed today, but in a statement says there would be no apology or compensation from the government. 2 years ago in opposition, he was livid that the housing agency was deliberately misusing meth tests to evict its tenants.
This whole fiasco shows a staggering level of incompetence by Housing New Zealand. It seems that they have strong-armed some of those tenants into paying tens of thousands of dollars of clean-up fees, again on the basis of dodgy testing. It's got all the hallmarks of Housing New Zealand being caught up in some kind of moral panic and doing massive financial and social damage.
A few months into his new gig as Housing Minister, it appeared Phil Twyford was going to carry on in the same way.
It was so bad and so wrong what had happened that Robert deserved an apology.
Here he is on Checkpoint in December, personally apologising to one tenant and promising change to come.
The moral panic around methamphetamine contamination of houses has been both drummed up and exploited by a meth testing industry that saw an opportunity to make a dollar by taking advantage of that moral panic.
But now, no blanket apology, no compensation. Auckland Action Against Poverty spokesperson Alastair Russell says that's hypocritical.
To have moral integrity, you need to have a consistent approach when you're in government or when you're out of government. If your approach changes depending on your status as either opposition or government, then that's an appalling situation.
Alastair Russell doesn't understand why the government will compensate farmers for a biosecurity breach that saw Mycoplasma bovis enter the country, but won't compensate those who were harmed by Housing New Zealand.
If that's okay for the farmers, it should be okay for low-paid workers and beneficiaries to be compensated for the failings of Housing New Zealand. I don't see a difference.
Housing New Zealand's Chief Executive, Andrew Mackenzie, who earns $46,000 a month, refused to be interviewed again today. He's never given RNZ an interview on his agency's meth testing policy, and his communications manager says he never will. From Parliament for Checkpoint, Benedict Collins.